Well, now the last time we spoke was you were in England. I was here in the States. It was unfortunate kind of circumstance that involved the passing of Sir George Martin,
Yeah.
and you were kind enough to spend a couple of minutes with me to share your
Yes.
feelings and your thoughts about that.
Yeah.
That was quite an event in the Beatles world, obviously, but got quite a bit of press. You did a ton of interviews. I saw all kinds of media all over the place,
Yes.
and
It all took place in one very crowded morning. You know, the news media now, they want their fix immediately, and they want it quite deep. But then by the afternoon they've moved on to something else.
that's another period in the news cycle.
Yeah, yeah, quite astonishing how quickly it passes now. But well, Sir George's death, it was very much the end of an era, really. Thankfully, we still have two of the Beatles and quite a few of the other people who work with them, but Sir George was instrumental to everything that happened in the studio, and it was such a key part of their music making from 62 to 70. And we'll never see his like again. You know, he was a great man. Not only a great record producer, but a great man.
There was just recently at the Grammy Museum a tribute to George Martin, and Brian Kehoe was there, and he told the story about visiting George's house afterward, and being with the family and so forth, and that there were actually no archival notes left anywhere. But Brian did find, he said, in the back of a cupboard somewhere, just a small notebook in which George had made annotations about his sessions from 1964. And at the end of the year, which of course was the year that the Beatles blew up and sold a gazillion records, at the end of the year, at the end of the booklet, he was basically complaining that he just got a thank you very much as opposed to a huge bonus, and he was planning his exit from EMI at that early.
Yeah, EMI didn't really do bonuses. It wasn't that kind of company, and those weren't those days in England. I think it was a '63 diary, actually, having thought about it, and it was that Christmas where certain things happened that made George think, I've had enough of this, I'm going to leave. He was under contract, so...
it didn't happen immediately, obviously.
It didn't, but he certainly... He resolved then and there, I think, not to renew the contract again. And actually in '62, when that then valid contract had been negotiated, George had very nearly not done it. I write the story in Tune In of how he was sorely tempted to not renew that contract and to move on somewhere else. But because he needed the money and the security of a weekly job, a weekly salary, he stayed. And of course, the Beatles fell into his lap a couple of months later. So he was very nearly not there for the Beatles at all. And then perhaps we wouldn't be talking about them.
That's one of the many what ifs.
Yeah.
If it didn't quite happen that way, we wouldn't be talking about it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's pretty amazing.
So George did have a purge of all of his paperwork a few years ago, and I did get to see some of it, but undoubtedly there was more that I didn't see. And now no one will see it, and I just think that's a great shame. I can understand from the family's point of view how, certain things must be private. When people become very public, there is a natural and understandable tendency to want to hang on to certain things and not let the public have everything, because you've got to have your own privacy as well.
Something needs to be protected.
It does, but by throwing away his diaries, I mean, the world's greatest ever record producer, throwing away his daily diary of who he's worked with, when the sessions began, when they finished. That actually, I think that belongs in a national museum or library, really. But you have to respect the decision.
Why do you think he did that?
I don't know.
Just purely speculating.
I don't know. I did go through George's 1967 diary about must be now 25 years ago, I went over one lovely sunny afternoon. I went to George's house in the country and sat with him and Judy. They were not yet Sir George and Lady Judy, they were just still George and Judy. And their wonderful secretary Shirley, and we sat in the garden and went through the 67 diary. And as you turn each page, so the memories come flooding out, and I recorded that. So I have that.
Beautiful.
But it's only that. It's not 66 or 65 or 64, or indeed into the 70s and 80s, because George continued to be engaged in very interesting work. And it really is a shame that we are denied that. But it was their personal property, and you have to respect that. I mean, we do have so much. We could cry over what we don't have, but we could just celebrate what we do.
I think under the circumstances, considering the way that producers and record companies were set up in Britain as opposed to the States, where there were more independent producers.
Yeah.
At the same Grammy tribute, Shel Talmy showed
Right,
up. And he
right.
was an independent American producer who went over there and produced early Kinks and early Who.
Yeah, I think he arrived in 61 or 62.
And
Shalmy Stone.
Yeah.
Shel Talmy and Mike Stone, I think.
Mike Stone, right. And one of the questions had to do with what was your impression of the British recording scene when you got over there?
Yeah.
And his immediate impression was that the producers who worked for record companies seemed to be just slaves almost.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't use that phraseology, but they were so encumbered by their record company that they really had no freedom to really create. And he thought that his role as an independent producer allowed him a lot more freedom and flexibility to work with different artists.
Well, he was
to be more successful, and not just take a salary or a paycheck and actually make some money.
He was there and I wasn't, and I always make that point. But actually, I would argue that the British system, although it appeared to be more restrictive than the American, actually had its beneficial effects as well. Because those A&R men were given complete liberty within the record division that they were operating. George Martin running Parlophone, for example. Norrie Paramore was Columbia, Wally Ridley was HMV, and Norman Newell was kind of across all the labels. Those were the four guys that EMI had. Decca had their men. They had this great machine behind them that was continually delivering talent to them. Or indeed they were, on behalf of the company, going out and looking at talent or receiving it when it came to the offices. They had full-time secretaries. They had to pay no overheads whatsoever. They had to pay no studio time. They had the studio whenever they wanted it. And they could do whatever they liked. Now, in Tune In, I didn't set out to dispel any myths, but one of the ones that fell away in the course of writing the book was that Parlophone was this kind of poor relation of EMI, and really it was a comedy label with joke acts on it.
Right.
And I myself was guilty of perpetuating that line in some of my earliest work, but looking at Parlophone much more deeply, as I did, and therefore at George Martin's work much more deeply, Parlophone was a fantastic record label. It was the most eclectic record label in the world.
I was just going to say eclectic,
yeah,
because it covered pretty much everything.
Yeah, and they had their hits and they had their big artists, but undoubtedly what George had was liberty to do what the hell he liked, to sign who he liked, to make a record with a talking budgerigar.
Right.
I mean, he did it all.
And
if he was independent, where every record had to sell or otherwise you lose your own money, then maybe he wouldn't have done that. But because it was the company money, he could do that. So actually,
he could afford to experiment a little bit more.
Yeah,
maybe.
And George Martin's work was, before the Beatles, incredibly experimental.
Yes.
That was something that he had up his sleeve when they were looking for sounds and effects in the years that followed. He had usually done it already, and said, well, I mean, he'd already been doing backwards tapes and chopping up tapes and all sorts of things.
Right.
So,
A lot of which informed the Beatles music.
yeah, had he
obviously.
been truly independent, he may not have had the scope to do that. I mean, so what Shel Talmy was saying was in his way right, but there are two ways of looking at
Right.
everything.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now I know you have to take off, and I really appreciate your time here, but have to ask. So Tune In ends. Tune In ends December 31st, 62.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So
the next one begins in the 1st of January 1963.
yeah,
Yeah.
that would follow.
Yeah.
That would follow. So then the next question is,
Yeah.
where does Volume 2 end?
Yeah, and I still
We still don't know
I still
that?
don't know. It still will be 66, 67.
Okay.
I'll get there. I'll get there. When you asked the question there, reminded me of all the Beatles the ex-Beatle interviews that were done in the 70s. There would always be the "when are you getting back together" question.
Yeah.
And in the old Grey Whistle Test interview that John Lennon did with Bob Harris, where Bob says the inevitable question, and John says, will they get back together? And I feel now, like in every interview I do, there's this inevitable question of,
Well, it's the elephant in the room, Mark.
when the hell is this next book coming out?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're all waiting, and
Thank you. Well, I love the fact that everyone's waiting.
We're waiting, and we're encouraging you, because Tune In was such a monumental work, and
Thank you.
And was so revelatory in a lot of ways, and did dispel a lot of myths, even if that wasn't the intent. Just correcting the information that had been, misinformation that had been spread around all of these years. It just served that purpose. So, yeah, we're looking forward to in my favorite Beatles era is the next one that you're working on.
Right.
Is the one that would be in
63, 4, 5, 6-ish.
would be covered in Volume 2.
Yeah.
To me, that's the most creative era before the rot set in, if you will.
You think that?
Yeah.
Others would disagree, but that's part of what makes the Beatles so special, and that is that there are so many angles of approach with the Beatles that everybody has their favourite bit,
Right.
or their favourite moment, or their favourite
Era.
thing.
Yes.
Not just an era, but they particularly like this song or that look or whatever it might be. It all will be covered. I never evaluate one thing over another, and I don't. I kind of don't. I have a mind that does not look for favourites. I'm not looking for the bit of information. I'm looking for all bits of information.
Right.
And the material that I've gathered, I've been saying this a while, but I already have more than enough. But if I'd stopped when I had enough, I wouldn't have come out here to look for more and found some great things. So, and that goes on and on and on. Now, the line will be drawn, but I can't draw it while there's still so much waiting to be found, because I would not be doing my job properly. And people who follow the interviews I give will hear me saying pretty much the same words time and again. I'm conscious that that there's a demand that I get it out, the book. I'm conscious of the fact that the publishers want the book out as well, and I myself in my own life, I need to finish it because I've got other things I want to do.
Such as
other books and other projects,
all
sorts of things.
Specify.
I come up with more ideas for projects than I could possibly ever have time for in my lifetime.
That sounds real familiar.
Yeah, and I want to do some of them before I head into the ground. So I need to get this done. I'm not dragging my feet because I'm enjoying myself. I am enjoying myself, but I'm also conscious of the fact that I've got to get on with it, get home, get on with it. So I'm a hard taskmaster of my own life.
Well, crack that whip, Mark.
Yeah, I crack it. But I crack it so often that it's becoming less effective now. Now I have my own ways of keeping myself on the ball, but the fact is that this job needs to be done properly. And properly means properly. It means not cutting any corners. It means paying proper attention to detail and realizing where you're light and going out to find more and so on. And so, yeah, I'm on it and I'm working hard, but this is just part of the process at the moment. This is still research.
Very good. Well,
when I write, you won't see me for a while.
Yeah, I think that was the case the last time. You were out researching for several years, and then you disappeared for 3 or 4 years as you got it all written
Yeah,
out.
and that will happen, and then I won't be out here for a long time. Yeah.
Well, again, very much appreciate your time. Always great to see you.
A pleasure, thank you.
And
Thank you for always asking me to do this. It's handy for me as well.
well, I hope that folks listening to this will understand that it's still a very fluid work in progress, and the excitement will never abate.
You're right, it won't.
No,
It won't.
heck no.
Yeah.
If it does, but just hurry up. I'm getting old.
Yeah, I know.
I want to read volume 3 before I check out.
Take your time and hurry up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the message.
Thank you, mate.
Okay.
One more time.
Thank you.
Stephen K. Peeples and Mark Lewisohn, over and out.